Rugby, England. The town is world known as the place where a soccer ball was first picked up, thereby starting the game of rugby. Rugby is the home place of Mrs. Jean Neal, a housewife and mother of 4 children. We travelled to Rugby to cover Mrs. Neal's extraordinary story. We are standing here outside the St. Cross Hospital in Rugby, England. After breaking her spine about 25 years ago, Mrs. Jean Neal spent about 4 years of her life here in this hospital. During that 4-year stay, she had to undergo at least 10 operations. Jean Neal's severe medical problems began as far back as 1964. It was in that year that she fell and damaged her spine for the first time. After laying for weeks in this St. Cross hospital without improvement, the doctors made the decision to remove the coccyx of the spine through surgery. That first operation was the start of many years of indescribable suffering and pain for Mrs. Neal.
I've known Jean for about 5 years, and I've been aware of her past medical history, which has included a long history of back pain, amongst other medical problems. She's had a car accident, which was quite a major trauma for her. Her back pain has been treated by manipulation, tablets and painkillers and so on in the usual way, and she'd had 2 operations on her spine to relieve the particular pain in the lumbar area. She'd also had an operation at the base of her spine to remove the coccyx, which was another source of pain.
Pain, operations, these beds, and then more pain. The 3 operations mentioned by Dr. West were only a few of the more serious ones revealed in Jean Neal's medical history. As already mentioned, in 1964 the coccyx was removed. In 72, sharp severe pain in the back was treated with traction, a plaster jacket, manipulation, an epidural and lumbar support, all to no avail. In 73, the first laminectomy was performed to remove a prolapsed disc. In 75, a second laminectomy, this time to alleviate the pain. In 81, a further reoccurrence of pain, this time on the right side of the back. Exploratory surgery was done and a protruded disc was removed. In September of the same year, Mrs. Neal had a terrible car accident, putting her head through a windscreen. Operations had to be done to remove embedded glass from the skull. All these medical difficulties left Mrs. Neal with one leg 2 inches shorter than the other and a hip that was out of joint. She also had other serious medical problems that nearly cost her her life.
I've had 3 heart attacks, angina, which is what he really left me with, this very bad angina. I had heart patches, which I had to put on daily and take heart tablets. I had bronchitis, very bad, and I used 3 inhalers a day to sort of regulate my breathing. Due to heart tablets that I was on, it was actually causing blindness, and I just have to have some really thick glasses to help me to see. The pain at times was so bad that my brain couldn't take it and I would just black out completely.
The worst medical affliction, however, was yet to come. In 1986, an accident happened that was to confine Mrs. Neal to a wheelchair almost permanently.
Say, look, 2 years ago, I was at my daughter's and bent down to pick one of the grandchildren up because my daughter was in bed ill at the time, and my back went again. But this time, it seemed to be for the last time. You know, I've spent the last 2 years in a wheelchair.
I think she'd been looking after her grandchildren and had gone to pick up one of them and had an acute, severe back pain. And it was really very difficult to suggest any further treatment. The normal things that one would do for a person with an acute severe back pain would be painkillers, perhaps anti-inflammatory tablets, manipulation, but for someone who's had 2 operations and with a long history of back trouble, manipulation I felt was completely out of the question. And the pain certainly didn't seem to get better with the usual course of bed rest and so on. And in fact, her pain over the following few months became worse and much more severe.
When all else had failed, Mrs. Jean Neal turned to a measure of last resort. She visited a special orthopedic hospital here in the northwest of England, in a town by the name of Oswestry. Here she saw one of Britain's leading orthopedic surgeons, a man by the name of Stephen Eisenstein. Despite his tremendous knowledge about severe back ailments, Stephen Eisenstein could not offer Jean Neal much hope. In a letter dated January 20th, 1988, Mr. Eisenstein offered to perform a dangerous surgical operation costing 3,000 to 4,000 British pounds, or about 7,000 US dollars. In his letter, he stressed that Mrs. Neal was a high-risk patient, and the best that could be hoped for would only be a slight improvement. Despite this dismal hope, Jean Neal made plans to undergo the operation at the Oswestry Orthopedic Centre. She was told the operation would cause her to be away from her family for about 1 year. It is amazing that during all this time of suffering, Jean Neal did not give up faith or hope. She not only faithfully attended a small Pentecostal Assembly of God church, but despite her pain, she insisted on teaching Sunday school to the youth. Jean's pastor, who has known her for 20 years and was responsible for bringing her to the church, described to us her condition. What do you say about it?
Jean was a chronic invalid, and a normal doctor or person seeing her would think there was no hope. She was a chronic invalid. Doctors even suggested that they would relieve her pain and, paralyze her for the rest of her days. They could easily do that. And the great man at Oswestry, he said he didn't really want to do the op, and he was offering her nothing, just going through with it because she wanted to.
We also interviewed another couple, George and Jean Sensical. They are close family friends of Jean and were able to give us some personal insights about Jean Neal's situation.
Well, the first time we met Jean, she was in a very poor condition. She had great difficulty in walking. That was before she had the accident, and we went to see her in hospital on 2 occasions. The first occasion she was on traction and in a very poor way. At that stage she was told that nothing at all could be done to help her. Every time she got in the car, on some occasions she screamed. She was in dreadful pain. She couldn't really put one foot before the other. And at times I felt most uncomfortable because, having got her in the car, I knew that I'd got the task of getting her out of it again. But she's been very good throughout. I think her faith has been absolutely tremendous.
She's been such a dedicated worker and member of the Pentecostal church, and while she was so ill and absolute in sheer agony, there's no other way to describe it, she was in sheer agony, we cried with her. I would go to the meeting happy with the joy of the Lord and everything else, and I would look at her because I would often sit further back because George prefers to sit a bit further back when he does come with me, and I would see her sitting on her cushion on the hard wooden chairs, and halfway through the meeting she would look round at me and